That's a good talk from a fellow Tommy. Yeah, my talk's on let's make an MCP server. Just a bit about me, I'm a cloud architect, do a little bit of DevOps and SRE at Abbott in Structured Heart. I'm a Google developer expert, and I came there by way of the Cloud Innovator Champion program, which has since kind of been retired, but it's still near and dear to my heart. I'm an open source advocate, and I'm an active blogger, and I've done speaking at places like Open Source North, New Relic user groups, Datadog meetups. All right, so some of you are probably saying, what's an MCP server, right? You've heard the term. I kind of got into this talk by being pretty much the same thing as Andy, and like I just got to do it to figure it out. So a little bit about AI tooling, and I'm thinking about Gen AI specifically, like making things. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It was started by Anthropic last year in 2024, and pretty much everybody adopted it in this past year. So Google, OpenAI, everyone else said, yep, that's the standard we want to use. And it's got libraries for Node.js, C#, Rust, Java, Python, all sorts of frameworks. And you can use Docker to make it even more portable. I'm going to talk about MCP registries today and tomorrow. And then the Drake meme is kind of like, the way it was endless retrieval augmentation with these huge contexts and huge token usage. So the way we were doing it before we had MCP is like, get a general model, stuff the crap out of it with all of your documents and hope you don't exceed your token usage. But it got expensive. And kind of the new way is these agentic flows, where you say, well, let the computer go work over here, and let me give narrowly defined tools so it has like a tool belt to go do those repeated tasks. And that's really the purpose behind MCP. So I wanted to start small. There's kind of two main frameworks I tend to lean into, which is Python and Node.js. So there's a fast MCP one, and I'd point to Luke's very good demo he has for fast MCP. So when I knew that he did Python, I said, I'm going to do Node.js. But both are have great documentation and are easy to containerize. I think if you, as a developer, are thinking, which way do I go? Do I go Python? Do I go Node? Node has some dynamic nature with callbacks you got to get comfortable with, but its dependency management with package JSON is really easy. Python, I think, is easier to understand from a development standpoint, and things happen in the order you would expect, but its package management's a little bit more janky locally. All right, so my next step is to, so I'm not going to mess around with that. Let's do the mouse here. I want to get going. Apologies. What you want to do is kind of create a folder and install Node. I use Node Version Manager in VM, and I'm going to use the latest, which is LTS JOD, which is Node 22. So once I have Node 22 set up, I'll make a directory to start this thing out, and then I'm going to go ahead and hop in there and do npm init. That creates this new structure where you give a name, you talk about your author, give a little description for what you're about to make. You can create the entry point. Now, I'm going to be doing TypeScript and JavaScript, so I'll dance between the two. And then you can give a test command. I never set the Git repo to start with. I do that later. And then you can do whatever license you like. I lean into MIT myself, though I think the guy who talked about FreeDOS was talking about GPL, so GPL is another way to go. So next, you're going to want to make a gitignore file. So with the gitignore file, I usually do this kind of little step that does the toptal, which used to be gitignore.io. So I can create a gitignore file real fast, and then I add my first commits. And that South Park meme is, if you forget to do a gitignore, you're going to pay for that later. You're going to have some VNV folder for Python. You're going to have node underscore modules you're going to have to clean up. So if you remember anything from my talk at all in doing development, at all, make a gitignore file first before you add your stuff, and you'll have a better day. So because I'm going to be doing something that engages with Codeberg, I'm going to go ahead and create a Codeberg repo first. Now, I'm trying to concatenate this 40-minute talk to 20 minutes. So in short, Codeberg's an open source version of GitHub. It's not GitHub. It's in the variant of Git-T. But we're going to be making a Node.js server, or a MCP server that talks to Codeberg, ForJo, Git-T. And so we're going to use our tool, a little bit of dog food. So the next thing, I'm going to reduce that to make it a little easier to read. Do an npm install save of Model Context Protocol /SDK. We're going to go ahead and add all our files and then add a remote origin to where we're going to stuff it. Now I use SSH, you could do HTTP. And the last thing I'm going to point out is a lot of those tools, whether you're using Azure repos, GitHub, GitLab, Codeberg, whatever, will always say something like git push -u origin I think B main, I always just do -- all. And the reason I do -- all, if you did any local branches as you were thinking things out, they'll get up there too, and you don't have to remember that. So just add -- all, and you won't ever have to worry about that. So now I see my code is up there in Codeberg. I got now some stuff, but here's the downside. It's I only left a couple yuck slides in there. It's kind of like a nothing burger, right? So, you know, it doesn't really do much of anything. So this is the TypeScript file. This is kind of the basis. By the way, I'll just tell everybody who's trying to take screenshots, and you're welcome to. I'll have a QR code at the end that has this PowerPoint deck you can just download, so it'll save you the trouble of copying and pasting. So what you're going to see here is that's the meat of it. So what we see is basically, I'm going to make a greeting, and I'm going to make a new template, and what it's going to say is, call it a greeting resource, and say hello name to the name that you pass in there. And that's all the meat. This one's a hello world example that actually is going to respond to something. And this part, which is the boilerplate, the only thing I point that out is to tell you two things. One, the default port's 3000, and it's going to expose itself on /MCP. That's all you really need to know. So now we're going to go ahead and test it. So I'm now back in VS Code, and I'm just highlighting the same stuff I just talked about. Wow, that sucks to read up there, but you can see here. So that's /MCP, and this is just pointing out port 3000 is what it's exposed on. So then all you got to do is say npx-y tsx for the TypeScript translator and the server.ts file. And the first thing I saw was an error. My computer's always running something on 3000, so I just quickly hacked it to be port 3030 so that I wouldn't have any issue there. I fire it up. Now the next piece I'm going to do is I'm not going to open this in a browser like it wants me to. I'm going to launch something called the Model Context Protocol /inspector. So when I go npx Model Context Protocol inspector, that pops up this little web app I use all the time, because you don't want to always have to like go to Gemini CLI or Claude or Copilot to test. You get this nice little web app that you can connect to a port. I got to change it to 3030, and now we can start to see things. So you got resources. I don't really do the resources much, but the templates is another word for tools. So when I see list templates, it's going to come back and give me a hello world greeting. So click list templates. You can see there's greeting. There's my greeting tool, and you can see it takes a name. So I probably should have just said DevFest because it says hello name, but I forgot that, so I said hello DevFestMN. Now when I do read, it says greeting, hello, comma, hello, %20 dev, %20 mn. But now we have an actual functional Node.js or TypeScript MCP server. We now have the basics. This is as much hello world basic as you can get. So my next thing is I want to do something with it, right? So my goal is to have it talk to Codeberg. Now in short, Codeberg is like GitHub. It's an open source, hosted in Germany, code repository, and it's based on ForgeJo, which itself is an open source fork of Git. Now I host my own ForgeJo because I'm like that, and so I wanted to use my own thing where I have autonomy and can control creating users very easily. So when I'm using this ForgeJo, that just happens to be my, we'll call it in-house Codeberg. So in the case of that, it has a REST API, and what I found is that these GenAI tools work great with REST APIs. So if you can get a REST API up, the GenAI tools love to talk REST APIs. The other thing I'm going to keep handy is the how-to guide. So I'm going to have that handy. We're going to need that in a bit. So now we're going to get into the GenAI stuff. I'm not going to record Gemini CLI running. You've done it before. You know what it looks like. I'm just going to talk about my prompts. So what I say is I have an MCP server that just serves an echo tool. I want to add a login and a get user tool for ForgeJo. The REST API is documented right here, and I point it to the Swagger. I say to test it, you may use this user, test MCP with password test pass. And make sure you note anything it takes to install in the README MD. I've told the GenAI tool what I'm looking for, where to find the current documentation, and where I expect it to write some notes. And it worked once. So then I got the login works, but now I get a 400 error. I know the password's right, and I dump the output, right? And it says, okay, the login works, but now I can't read properties of undefined status. And now I get the login is failing with 405. I know the username and password's correct. Go to the Swagger. And so, and this is kind of a point I want to make. I then said, all right, just put debug out. I need to fix this. Just update my app to spit debug to the console because something's up and I'm not figuring it out. So what I did is this is where you cannot vibe code your way to solutions every time. I paused. I knew something was wrong with my auth flow. I started to look. I started to look back at that documentation. The way these tools work is they have a login URL where you can take basic auth and get a token, and you give it a token name. Once. If you use that token before, you can't do it again. You get an error. You can always ask what tokens are out there, but you can't get the token back. You just know if it exists. But you can delete a token. So what's my flow? Say, hey, have I used this token name before? MCP tool? Oh, I have? Delete it. Now create a new API token, and now I get it back. And the point I'm trying to make here is if at first you don't succeed, try, then stop. There's no sense in making a damn fool of yourself and blowing up your token usage. So now I've gotten past that. And this is where I'm like, should I really use the Gemini CLI or should I just write the damn code myself? I'm like, do this. Use this command to get it with get. Then if one matches the server, delete the ID. Use this command to delete it. Use this command to get it. And I basically tell the tool the exact flow I'm trying to get to log in. And it works. Now my login works over and over and over. So then I start, and this is my other pro tip in creating these tools that talk to RESTful interfaces. I'd like to add issue searching on this endpoint, find the documentation in the Swagger at exactly this spot. I want to add list issues, find it at this spot. I want to create issues, find the documentation at this spot. I've given the GenAI tool everything it needs to be successful now to add tools to my MCP server. So the last step I do is working, and I have a bunch of tools that now work. I say, we've added some tools to this MCP server, update the README, get everything in there. Because that way when I go back to the Git repo at some later date and I'm trying to remember what tools did I do, what do I need to pass to them, I have it all in Markdown on my server and I don't have to remember it. All right, I've done all this and it's worked, but now I got a few pieces of tech debt. I left in there all sorts of hard-coded things to Isaac's web server. I don't want that. I want to use this with Codeberg. I want people to use this on their own servers. So I ask it, please go replace all the instances of forgejoe.freshbrew.science and use it for a parameter. And it does it. Now here's where I'm being wasteful. I pissed away 5 cents because it replaced it once and then I let it do it again and again and again. I could have run find and replace just as easily. I want to test it before I try to test it anywhere else. So I'll launch out the server. I'll do that model context protocol inspector. And what you'll notice here is we now have an instance where I can type the URL to the server and get back content. I now want to test this with Gemini CLI. I want to now use it in Gemini CLI. So I'm going to try to publish this to the node registry so I can get it in a reliable way. Once I've logged into the NPM service and I posted it, I'm going to try to add it, but I also thought maybe I should also do Docker. Like, I might want to do this as a container too. I was like torn between which way to do it. So I made a Docker file because doing a Node.js Docker file is phenomenally easy. That's the entire Docker file right there. And what I found in trying to add it is it wasn't working with NPX, but Docker was working fantastic. And what I think I did wrong was I did HTTP streamable, and the NPX by default in Gemini CLI is standard I/O. And I should have figured that out. But it's working great in Docker, and we can actually see our tools. We see create issue, echo, get user. They're all right here from the MCP server we just built. And now my Gemini CLI can use it to make things. I want to try it in Copilot, right? So we use a variety of tools. We're not trying to marry ourselves to just Google tools. So I launched this up with that, with Docker. And then my next step is to go into Copilot in Visual Studio Code. So I got my port 3030. So now you're in Copilot. You go to Settings. You go to that little MCP icon, that funny little squiggly. And then what you're going to see here is it says, add a server. You're going to do localhost 3030/MCP. It always gives some really dumb name, so give it your own name for the MCP server. And if you're in Windows Subsystem for Linux, if you're that kind of person like I am, you got to say remote so it runs it on the Linux server. Otherwise, it's going to try to run it in Windows and fail you. Now, I already know it's working because right here it says 6 tools found. So even in your settings in Copilot, it tells you right away it's working because otherwise I wouldn't find the output. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Don't? You want to see an error? So you see I have the settings, and I see the type of HTTP, and I have the local. Now I'm going to try to use it. I want Copilot to create some issues in Forge in I want it to log into my Forge show. Sorry, I have a Vicunja MCP server. My brain just mixed up MCP servers. Say log in to Forge Joe Fresh Boot Science with this username and this password, and then show me a list of the issues that are in my GitHub, my repo, in my project.
Isaac, I think you mentioned you only have 20 minutes, but you do have a full 40 minutes for your talk.
We're gonna keep it on time.
I encourage you to not feel rushed.
All right, I don't feel rushed. So as Lloyd says, I need to hurry up. All right. So I did a public project owned by builder admin and started to go. And the first thing that I get is it's logging in, the login works, but it doesn't get my issues. So if you say allow, because the way Copilot works is you always have to say allow to all your tool runs, we'll find that the login works just fine. I think it says the login works just fine this time. So I gave it the URL, the password, the login isn't working. Well, I do want to skip ahead. One of the things I figure out is that, the password need to be reset. And then I also realized that I need to use a public repo that I could see. Well, I'm going to get ahead to just about here. So I know that the password is good. I know that the user is good. I know everything about this should be good. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, log into the Forge Joe with this username. I think I update the exact password. But what I want you to do is see if you can see the error, because I saw the error afterwards. Have you seen the error yet? I just saw it. So it's saying login. I told it what server, right? I said login to Forge Joe Fresh Boot Science, right? Connect to this. It says it's going to connect to that, right? But is it connecting to that? Let's expand it. What's it logging into? That's right. The AI thought it'd be smart. That's an HTTP server. I should probably put HTTPS:// at the beginning of your instance name. I never made my MCP server plan to handle protocol. I just wanted the name of it. So what's going on behind the scenes, once I figured that out, is that this error kept failing because it's logging into HTTPS://ForgeJoe.FreshBootScience, which isn't a valid URL. And this is where I never told it to put the HTTP in there. Gen AI is trying to be smarty pants on me. So now, this is where, and Gemini is the same. I don't want to say that Gemini doesn't have its faults, but with Copilot, I'm like, just do the damn thing I told you to. Do not add HTTPS. And then I put it in double quotes. Like, sometimes you just have to be really frickin' explicit with the tool to get it to do the thing. Now, the other way you could say is maybe other people would encounter this. Maybe I should put a checking layer in my Node.js code to say if they have a protocol in the beginning of it, strip it out, right? I could make my code more robust. So now we see, yes, the instance is correct. Allow. The login worked. I got a token. Fantastic. Allow. Go into that server. And now I'm seeing some issues. Fantastic. That's a test issue. So let's go ahead and now create an issue in my thing. So this is like creating a GitHub issue, but just using ForgeJoe or Codeberg. So create with a summary. And because I exposed it through the REST API, I have all the fields available. I could assign user, priority, etc. Doing a demo for DevFestMN. It says go ahead. And I don't trust it. It says it created an issue. Should we go see if it created the issue? So we'll bring a browser window over. And I can see an issue right there from Copilot, created for a demo with a comment and now. So now we have an MCP server that actually works. So what do we have? Now I did push something up to Docker Hub, but at this point I essentially have our laptop, a GenAI tool, things running locally on Docker, and code stuffed up into Codeberg. I'd like to use the MCP registry. I don't like the MCP registry. Their documentation sucks bananas, and not a good banana like Nano. So you can follow the guide, and it'll say, create a key. And then it errors, and it errors. You need to create a P384 of an elliptical curve type of key. The number of times I tried to make that work in GSM, I tried asymmetric sign, raw asymmetric sign, symmetric encrypt, decrypt. Once I tried on the 5th try of the different lengths of key, I figured out it really wanted elliptical curve, P384 with SHA-384 digest, and then it errors on you because it needs to go to the NPM registry, not your local code, to find the settings for the NPM registry. So now you got to go back to publish to the NPM registry updates for your package JSON so you can add it to the MCP registry. So now you're dancing back and forth between you trying to log in and not log in. And then you get stuff like that says, that's how you need to authenticate to publish stuff under your own domain name. I don't know what that means. So now you're figuring out that must mean they want me to create a text record at the local thing on my cloud DNS. And then I realize it has the wrong frickin' transport. It's got standard I/O, not HTTP. So it's not too bad. I will show you how you fix it. But the login for the MCP registry lasts under a minute. So you need to be ready to publish the moment it gets there. So here's a get diff. I've now changed my package JSON from 102 to 103. I've changed it to be streamable HTTP. So what I got to do is do a npm publish. This pushes it up to the npm registry. And then from there, I can do the MCP publisher login to Google DNS, Google KMS, pass it the path to my symmetric key. Don't worry, it only takes me a second to type this in. Once you get that exact GSM key and key instance value stored in there for the cryptography, and hit enter, number 5, it'll tell you typed it wrong. So then you're going to get mad about that. And before you rage quit and pitch your laptop across the room, realize you can actually bring the browser window over from Google Cloud and realize there's a nice copy resource name that saves you a whole lot of trouble. So now I just hit the delete button because there's somewhere in there's like an extra letter or typo spelling. So now it's authenticated for about a minute, and then I can do a publish. So that's the publisher login. Then you can say an MCP publish. Now, I will say that if you don't have an axe to grind against GitHub and you like living in the GitHub world, and a lot of people do, you don't have to go through that amount of auth to publish with a GitHub URL. Some people like GitHub, some people don't. So there you can see that I'm published, and there's a new entry, and this time it actually says that it is streamable. And the way we know it's actually in the npm registry, if we're like questioning it, is we can do a curl command to interrogate the MCP registry for our particular package. Well, that was the curl command to show you back. All right, so now I got the code locally, but I want to do CI/CD. Right now I'm just kind of doing like a Rube Goldberg. I'm just turning things on and scaring chickens and making squirrels dance on popcorn. I'd rather have this in a CI/CD system. So in GitHub, you can just do a GitHub runner. It's got access to the Docker sock. That's not the same thing in Codeberg runners. So I'm going to add a Codeberg runner. I won't go through the Docker Compose on that. But now I have a local Linux box in my lab tied up to Codeberg. And if you want to save yourself some trouble whenever you're making Docker images, if you don't have privileged containers, which you don't always do on shared infrastructure, you can use something called Kaneko to build containers and push it up. So here you can see I'm doing a Kaneko action, and we're doing 2 places. One to Docker Hub, so you all can just get it from my Docker Hub location, and one to my private Harbor CR, because again, I'm a nutter, have to have everything in my lab. It publishes and builds, and now I can go to Docker Hub and see that my container that anybody can use is now out there. So you don't have to build my container. You just do Docker pull and Docker run and add it to Gemini and be good to go. I can also see that it's in my Harbor CR, so I don't have to trust the rate limiting that's in Docker Hub. So, at this point, we have our builds going, but we've pushed it up to Docker Hub, and we can consume it from Docker Hub now instead of having to run it from a local build. Now, you may say, why not Cloud Build, right? Cloud Build could do this. Well, Cloud Build doesn't support non-open source vendors. So if you use GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket, you're good to go. But if you like to live in a world outside of GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket today, it's not available. So I don't know. I'll keep nudging them. They always know I'm the curmudgeon on the call that's going to bring up, what about the other tools? But if you're in GitHub, you could just have code build build it, or Cloud Build build it. So now we're going to deploy to Cloud Run. So Wes, you gave a demo earlier this morning where you talked about App Engine, Standard, and Flex, and Cloud Run, and made the illusion that we'll see some Cloud Run deploys of live code. And it's exactly as easy as he said. Basically, you got to deploy it to Cloud Run and just give it a region to go in. Then you give it a path to your Docker container. Be prepared, I'm going to give another ding on Google here. You can deploy it, and it's going to create the traffic and the revision, the IAM policy, everything you want. Creating revision, creating revision. And they're going to use service URL. Oh, I took all that out. My whole little nitpick was just that I couldn't use my Harbor CR. You have to use it in Docker Hub, GCR, or GitHubs. But now you got a URL. That's the URL. This is a Cloud Run instance. That's live. Go ahead. That charges me. Have fun. So that's an MCP server you can use. So a Chromebook can now use this MCP server. No one has to even have Docker locally. And now to add it to Gemini, all I got to say is that URL, remember I told you the /MCP. Add /MCP to the URL, and now I got that MCP server out there. I've now built an MCP server from scratch in Node.js, ran it locally, published it to a global registry, and I now have it running in Cloud Run for pennies to serve any server I have. So what does that mean? We went from having things going over in Docker Hub over to GCP Cloud Run. Veo put the sound effects in, I didn't. And now it's running in Cloud Run. So now I have a completely independent flow. It's all happening over there. Our next step is to add a Gemini CLI extensions. So we can do an extensions link to link it locally with a dot, which works great. And now I can see the tool running in that way. And you can see it extensions list, but you can see unlike the other ones like Nano Banana, which has an HTTP URL, this one has a home path workspace, so I know it's running out of my local folders. I can also add Gemini-extension JSON to my repo and push it. Oh. So now what you're going to see is I'm going to list my extensions and see that I have deleted the other one. So it just has a Nano Banana and Vicunja in here at the moment. So now I'm going to say Gemini extensions install, and I'm going to give it the, actually, okay, I think I can say this. I'm going to get in trouble maybe, because it could be the release happening on Tuesday. But I used to say you have to switch that the Git URL from SSH over to HTTP, because Gemini CLI extensions installs only support HTTP. But the release either this last Tuesday or this coming Tuesday, by the time you're trying this, has Git support in there, which is pretty awesome to me. And now you can see we've installed it from a Codeberg URL into our Gemini. And if I ever update it, anybody who's subscribed that way will get the update to the server. Now there's this great Gemini CLI extensions. And if you do GitHub, it can show up here. And again, they know that I've poked them a few times of being able to add other things. So when it came to my Vicunja MCP, which is a different one I built over in ForgeJo, I just sync my repo to GitHub just for the pure purpose of seeing it listed here. Some of the things I'd go next is to move it to a local K8s instead of Cloud Run and switch it to standard IO, which in all honesty I did already. And of course, if you want to launch it locally in Kubernetes, it's a simple deployment and service because it's already based on Node.js and HTTP. It's as simple as it can get. So that's it. I did keep to time. That's a link to the PowerPoint. And I told you this is a 40-minute presentation. I pulled down to 20. So if you want to see the 40-minute version of the same thing, the dry run is there linked on YouTube as a private video for you guys.